I thought this was a great conversation. A lot of times when I'm involved in things like this, I try and get a mountaintop perspective or view of things. And believe it or not, the very issues that we are discussing that are issues is hip hop just that. It's the diversity, basically. I like to tell people this when they ask me when Nas came out with the whole thing with is hip hop dead? And I think we're kind of talking about that right now. Where is it at? Is it in a good place? I think it's at a place that isn't the most attractive place, so to speak, or the most like you're watching a movie, a good movie. Even in a good movie, you have those parts that aren't as exciting as other places, but it's part of the story. And you cannot take it out, because if you take it out, you're taking out a major part for the story to make sense, the way life is. When I look at hip hop now, like a record was played a very long time ago, before two turntables came together, you'd have one person, you say, who's the DJ? And they put that one record on at a time, and the time you put a 12-inch on, and it's playing, and the record is so dope that even the person who's in charge of playing the music is on the dance floor. You're in paradise now. I mean, this is the best song that's playing, and it's great, but all of a sudden,
Dead in hip hop conversations. Dead in hip hop conversations. Here with Night Wonder. What's good, homie? Peace to the A. Dead in hip hop.
We were talking about Tupac yesterday. I think about like the miracle. I think I'm really like deep into it. So I'm listening to like Me Against the World. And I'm like, do you know how much it took to get to the point where sonically hip hop music sounds the way it sounds?
yeah.
Where lyrically Tupac was able to do overdubbing and things that he did. I mean, he stepped into the booth with all his history on his shoulders. It's not like he just starts rapping just out of nowhere. Like, he's learning from Nelly Mel and Chuck D, and you know what I'm saying? Like, he's coming with history, and he steps to the booth with that. Same thing with the producers, like, you know, Easy Mo B and Shock G, like, even little nuances of how our snares were captured. Like, when you sample a snare, like, I remember watching an interview with Marley Marl, and he was like, man, I discovered it by mistake. Like, I was just tapping the pads and sampling something, and I happened to sample a snare by mistake. And he said when he did it, he was like, looking around like, yo, did you see what I just did? Like, yo, this is crazy. What he had discovered was, now I can isolate snares from old school records, so I can have the sonic quality of a Motown or you know, Philly International or any sonic quality I'm looking for, but I can isolate it. And now I can trigger it with my drum machine. So these developments took so many years, man, for hip hop to get to that point. So when the next generation ignores that, basically what they're doing is hindering the growth of it, because now you're starting over. It's like, all right, well, hit the reset button.
I think they do that because now it's so easy. Like you were just saying how he was playing around and he just happened to stumble upon that accidentally. Dudes don't have to do that no more because they have these computers. All it takes is 2 clicks. You have everything you need. They don't have to work for anything anymore.
One of the things I had to do, I was hanging around, you know, jazz musicians and musicians from the R&B community that we sampled. And we have to be honest too, as elders of hip hop, like we have to say, look, we kind of disrespected our elders too, because we took the sample and we just was like, yeah, we don't need, you know what I'm saying, to do this or whatever, or like even the example of the whole Stetson Sonic talking all that jazz. Like, I know the backstory to that, and it was based in not showing respect for the elders. It was based in the idea that basically, like, that stuff is old. They even say James Brown was old until Rakim came with I Got Soul. So the rebellion, and of course that situation is reconciled, and you know, Daddy-O is cool with the person he was writing about. But the truth of the matter is, like, we didn't have a respect for the past. And that culture of not having a respect for the past is detrimental to the development of each, whatever it is. I don't care if it's culinary arts, if it's designing clothing, whatever it is, if you're not respecting your past, you're not going to be able to build on the foundation and just keep it going and get into a classical era. Like, my biggest achievements artistically happens to be because I kept studying the elements. Like, I studied Chris and I studied Rakim and Bone Thugs and Chip Fu and Busta and anything you can think of, and even the new cats.
I think, listening to you a few minutes ago, is like one of the things you just said is the fact that those guys did study,
Right.
People that they admire, and they did actually have something to draw back on. Right now, like C-Town said, there's no studying. I could just go grab Fruity Loops or Pro Tools or anything and just start tinkering around, and next thing I know, I'm a producer, and I can put something out, but I don't know the foundation or the elements of producing or taking and incorporating different tracks and layering those songs to make something different. I can just, give me this bass line, give me this snare, give me this hi-hat, you got a song. And that's it, and then they just chop it around, and then, all of a sudden, a couple of people pick them up, and then here they are. And then they tell their story. And then somebody else hears that story, and then they say, "Oh, well, if he can do it, I'll do it too." And it's creating a cycle that's going to continue to build until somebody comes in and try to actually pull these guys in.
I had a conversation the other day about the humanity of music dying because of this type music. Technology driven and technology based music. So you take a snare, for example, a drummer playing boom, bam, just the humanity of your arm swinging. You can't consistently swing like a robot and hit the exact same note. So there will be dynamics created by your humanity. So if you hit the table, see, every time it sounds slightly different. So there's humanity is causing it to be more alive.
Makes me ask the question is, what is the agenda of it all? Is the whole thing about music to give this one person or group credit for making it? Or was the purpose for it to make the listener feel a certain way in regards to being inspired, something that does something to them? Like, what is the ultimate goal? So it's like, to me, it makes me think of the question that asks, it's like, now what's happening with texting and stuff. We've created our own language now. We're creating new words. We call it abbreviations, but it's really becoming a new words. And on my brand news network, I did a story where the person was asking the question is the goal about proper English, or is the goal to get the message to the person that the English was created for in the first place? What difference does it make how it's spelled? If you want a person like, watch out, you don't want to get hit by the thing, what difference does it make how you spelt it? You know what I'm saying? So when you're dealing with the music, I'm just asking a question. I'm not saying I have a particular answer for it, but when I hear a song that I think is garbage, but another person will be like, yo, that was a jam, and I dealt with it, this happened then, and it did this for me, whatever, and it makes me stop and go, well, maybe that's what it was all about, whatever. And then, like, it's unfortunate, one person will accept something from another person based on how they look and do it, but another person will look a whole new entire way. And you just said the same thing, but they said it, and for some reason it rocked. Whether that person was a pretty boy, pretty girl, slightly overweight, whatever the case may be. So I'm asking, what comes first, the chicken or the egg in this case?
If you think about, like, what you just said, the whole thing with texting, it's like, I know that a lot of people that say how texting killed the written letter. And how I know people that will get actually excited if you sent them like a real written letter. I mean, I know a lot of dirty ass people, but like I would feel hyped like if a chick actually gave me a handwritten love note type of deal versus she sent me, I think you're cute in a text. So like, yeah,
which one
I would prefer the letter because it seems you're actually putting real feeling and emotion into this versus just this.
When you look at things, defining moments that took place in hip hop, you can see and match them with things that took place with rock and roll, with blues. It was interesting to me because I'm a big historian and study a lot about pop culture and other areas that have changed the world as we know it, had influences. I like that word better than teaching. Is that rock and roll Alan Freed, very well-known disc jockey who actually introduced rock and roll on a large public platform. Rock and roll, did you know, is a phrase for sex.
I didn't know that.
That's what it meant.
I did not know
It was
that.
it's like we have
Rock and roll, guy.
languages like that's fresh, whatever. Among pop culture or commercial thing, underground, rock and roll meant I'm going to rock and roll that girl. We going to rock and roll. It was sex. So that's why the masses had a problem with it and tried to keep it off radio and didn't like Elvis Presley doing the moves because rock and roll meant sex. And blues and jazz was accused of being the momentum and the inspiration for using drugs. That's why they tried to keep that out. That's why the music was like kind of sad and do this. And if you listen to is a great documentary by Quincy Jones. Why they don't show it more, I don't know, and I'm so glad I have it. It's called Say It Loud. And when you watch this documentary, it goes over a span of like well over 5 hours. But when you hear the lyrics that went along with a lot of those great blues singers, women, and whatever, and like, I forgot the lady's name, heavyset woman, very popular, had a record called You Can Put Your Hot Dog in My Bun. Yes. When you hear this thing, you think Little Kim was the first? She wasn't. Well, when you hear the language that took place in the outhouse, the juke joints, where they call them, and when you see that scene from Color Purple, where they go and party with the thing, those places was very real. And that's where that kind of music took place in the backwoods. And it was dealing with depression and money, so it's like you get drunk and you get some food and you have sex, you know, and the powers that be, we know who they are, being, you know, politically correct, wanted to make sure that stayed out, your religious situation, Bible Belt, that's the devil's music or whatever, because they got wind to what all those things meant.
You know,
Maybe that's why you like rock and roll.
You like them homeworkers though, man, but I thought you like them homeworkers,
Might be a linebacker. That's
Oh man. What was you gonna say, Mike?
I actually wanted to go back to what you were saying with the, you know, how technology, if it can get to a place where it can emulate the feelings that we put into stuff when it comes to art. You know what? I don't think that it'll ever happen. And the reason why, I think the harder you work for something, the more you care about it. If it takes me, you know, 12 hours to perfect a beat, that beat is going to be the best beat I can do. But if it takes me 10 minutes to perfect a beat or to put a beat out, it's gonna sound like every other beat that I do because I didn't really work that hard for it. It's like a painting. Like if you're working on a painting and you want to make that painting as good as it can possibly be, you're gonna spend hours and hours and hours on it. Which is why I never got into the whole digital painting thing, because it makes no sense to me. You know, getting a pad, putting something down, and then having the computer auto-correct what you put down. How do you auto-correct a piece of art? That makes no sense to me. It's like if I'm painting something, this is what I feel. Screw ups and all. If there's stray lines, I don't go back and correct that because that's my art. That's what it is.
Part of humanity, you know, from the beginning, you know, part of our evolution is trying to make things better, trying to make things easier. And that's what technology is. You know what I'm saying? We make it better, we make it easier. So that person, when you was talking about hitting that pad, right? There was somebody else, the geek that works with computers, he was thinking, damn, how can I perfect that? How can I make that easier for you to do, to keep replicating it? So I do think that it takes a little bit away from humanity because mistakes are part of human nature. And the person that thought about the computer program to make it perfect wasn't thinking about that. Right. But you know, I still think that there's a human element to it because you still have to listen to those sounds and still put them together. Granted, they're perfected by the program, but you still have to have an ear. You can't just be, and sometimes it does happen. Sometimes you just come off the street and you get it and you have a knack for it and you can do it, but you still have to have that knack. You see what I'm saying? You still have to have that knack. So even though that I do agree that a lot of that is taken away, the human element, somebody still had to do it. And I agree, the whole autocorrect thing, I don't like that either because humanity is imperfect. And that's what makes us who we are.
Well, two things that let me know we was in trouble with technology was when they put speed dial on the telephone.
Oh, yeah.
Because y'all going back to writing letters and stuff, you know, the human thing. To me, it meant so much when you met that woman and she gave you the number and you memorized that number.
Yeah.
I don't know a number now.
Right.
My cell phone or whatever I have, I'd be in like so much trouble. But it made, what I'm getting to is it made your brain exercise. It made you, and then when I found out you can use a calculator now to do your SATs, it's like they accept it in the thing. You can do it, and it's like that's like
Right,
you know
it
what I'm
was.
saying. But it's taking away your process of thought. But on the note you was talking about, it makes you feel one way or the other because some good friends of mine, Ron Lawrence and Sonny Hassan-Poor, they came up. I don't know if you're familiar with this documentary called Founding Fathers, and they question the real birth. They question giving all the credit to hip hop coming out of just the Bronx. They get into matters of where people really came from in New York, and shouldn't that be more about it than just the Bronx? But it's interesting. They also went into something else. Prior to two turntables coming together, the mixer wasn't always there. A guy by the name of Richard Long, I'm obsessed with documentaries. A documentary that talks about how hip hop came along in the clubs. He watched all the trouble that the DJs was going through to go from one turntable to the other, and perfected and created the mixer with the crossfades. So is that better?
We have a paradox because there was a point where we didn't have instruments, we had to use turntables and do what we had to do. But I don't think we're at that point anymore. Right now, hip-hop artists have access to a lot more financially. But to touch on your point, man, and there's something to be said about the artists who had to struggle for it.
You feel it more.
Yeah, I mean, these producers today don't have to go and get records. They can just go on Groove Shark or just get, like, dudes will be doing a tutorial and they'll be like, yeah, I got a link down here for all the drum samples.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, like, there is something to be said for the guy who says, yo, man, I'm gonna get my own sounds. We are missing Max Roach. You know, there's like Max Roach was a drummer who had rhythm. Like, I talked about him too, man. He could play a time signature on top of a time signature. So he could be playing this 4/4 time. He could be playing a 5/4 drum pattern on that. That takes incredible sense of rhythm. You know what I mean? And so we're losing that by the drag and drop culture. We're not challenging people. Like, if you give them an MP and say turn the quantize off, could you keep that rhythm? Because Dilla used to turn it off. Battle Cat and dudes like that, they'll turn the quantize off because sometimes the machine doesn't have the swag or the swing. You know what I'm saying, that you're looking for, because it's very rigid. It's rigid, you know what I'm saying? So you have times, man, where quantize will get close, but what them dudes like Miles and Elvin Jones on the drums, or Coltrane, what them dudes were doing, the quantize couldn't do that. Like, these computers couldn't capture that and can't. So we will have to, at some point, get back to mistakes.
There's another element that we are missing today, and I think it's the spirituality that a lot of those artists had. When you mentioned Marvin Gaye, when you mentioned Miles Davis, when you mentioned John Coltrane, they had a deeper spiritual connection to God or to whomever. And that came out in their music. If you look at where we are today in society, we're kind of lacking that a little bit.
You know, it's interesting, again, going back to it, it's the lack of soul. It's like, that's what my father was telling me. The good stuff comes out of people's pain, you know, mistakes, you know, in life. You know what I'm saying? I got to write about this. I know what encourages me, you know, something that was popular for a while when they say, you know, the haters motivate you. You know, they do. You know, if you're on the right side of where you're at in your wholeness and your people, what they're going to say is going to stop you, or either it's going to motivate you to do what you got to do. That's pain. You know what I'm saying? Who wants to be in those kind of predicaments? So, and then that's what makes hit records. You can't front on Mary J. Blige. You know what I'm saying? Nope. Women relate to her pain or something she went through. It's a commonality. When I teach my students, I talk about, don't push me because I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. At that time, what was going on in the 70s, going into the 80s, was what we're experiencing today, the depression, you know, financial crisis. Guess what? Everybody can relate to that. Hide in your car because a tow truck might get it. You know, all of this kind of stuff going on. So it's all about what's relatable, the commonality, but then, yeah, I can give you the words, but where's that pain that's resonating out of you that's hitting me? I know the thing that used to move me in music is the chords, and the way the chords would go into the next chord. That's what I love about, and one of the reasons why I work with O'hene. It's music again. But when I think of, like, I had an interview with Ed Gordon, and he's starting this new series, and he's asking everybody, what was the first record that you heard in your life that really, to this day, that feeling is still there, never left you? And I said Ramsey Lewis and Earth, Wind & Fire's Sun Goddess, but there's so many others. I should have said Just a Touch by Slave. The Spinners, Could It Be I'm Falling in Love? It's something about that. That just makes people, it's something about what that chord does to you. When I normally ask my students, and I had to, speaking about like that generation gap, because prior to the Lord blessing me with giving them this question in order for me to be more on their same page, when I first started teaching hip hop culture, I assumed everyone heard the very same rap record I heard, or the one that moved me, which was The Message by Grandmaster Flash and Fifth Rhyme, which I feel is the greatest rap record that's ever been made. I like what KRS once said about it. He feels that was the first rap song. But I asked my students, what was the very first rap record you ever heard? And how did you hear it? Now that helps me know where they're at when they came in. Because some people will say a record that is like, wow, it's like nowhere near the very first rap record. So I posed that to y'all. What's the very first rap record y'all ever heard?
Rap record?
Very first rap record.
Oh man.
And how y'all are reacting is the way I prove my point, because people don't think that deep, because that was that first impression. It probably has affected your thing with rap ever since. It's been the barometer in regards to what's a good rap record, how it makes you feel. That's how much of an influence that first one had, because that's how so different it was from music as you know.
Rap came out when I was in 3rd grade. No, it didn't come out, but
Well, I mean,
I caught on
what's
to
the
it.
first
But
one?
I'm trying to think of like
the first one that stayed on your
Like, that's rap.
But I'm saying, like, I can't think of the first one because there were
Man, for me, it
probably
was
Rob Bass.
I know we said them before, Kid and Play.
But yeah, 'cause I'm saying
Yeah, we
like
said
so
them.
many songs
Yeah.
came out at the same time that we were hyped on.
Right.
But yeah, it was Rob Bass, it was, Kid and Play. Those are the songs that came out and I was just like, what is this? I like this. I can't dance for shit, but I like this.
So that's a good point about Melly Mel, because it's one thing to make a nice dance record, but when somebody comes and says some stuff, you still reflecting on that. Now the next record is on, it's like, I don't even hear that.
Well, the reason why that record was so impactful, because at the time when, a lot of people don't know, Grandmaster Flash and Fred, they didn't want to do that record. Sylvia Robinson, owner of Sugar Hill, had to talk them into doing that record. The reason why they didn't want to do that record ended up being in their favor for why that record is so historic. It came out at a time where they totally went against the grain. Nobody was making any record. It was always about, let's party, this is what we're going to do if we have some money, all of that. That record came in and just blindsided everyone, but thank God in such a great way that it dealt with a subject matter everybody unfortunately could relate to. But everybody was happy. It was like, let's party, we ever have some money, hotel, motel, Holiday Inn, all of that stuff. And now here's reality like kicking us in the face, and that's why it became a defining moment, because it made you pump your brakes. And to me, that's what I think rap is about. Or one of its main purposes is that, okay, now here's something that we can speak on that can be a ministry, in regards to ministering to you, to let you know, hey, you're not the only one going through this. Don't feel like you need to jump off the ledge because you feel like such a fool because you have to do this to earn a living. So that's sometimes like what O'Hene's talking about music can do, but I'm still curious to know, what was the record you said?
Oh man, for me, I grew up a little different because I'm Cuban, so I grew up very Hispanic in my household. So hip hop wasn't big for me early on, but early American influences was Michael Jackson. I had all of his 45s. But Salt and Pepper was like the real first hip hop that my mom introduced me to, and Push It was like my joint when I was a kid. But I didn't really get into hip hop until later on, till I was about, about 9th grade? How old are you? About 15, 16? 9th grade?
10th grade, yeah. 10th grade, you 15, 16.
Okay, so I was like 14 when I got back.
You're the barometer. You're my height stick.
Right.
So who were you? So for me, man, I really got into Tupac and Biggie. That's like really when I really got into hip hop, when I was like, oh, this is something I really like. But before then, salsa, merengue, all of that stuff, because that's what was in my household. So.
I think for me, it was either the first rap record where I was like, wow, it was either between Eric B for president or Ain't No Half Stepping by Big Daddy Kane and Benita Applebone. You know, like my joints that I was just like, okay, like this is it. I'm sold. Because before then, all I listened to before hip hop was Stevie Wonder, pretty much Stevie Wonder, Earth, Wind and Fire, and Stevie Wonder. Like that's all I listened to when I was a kid before I got turned to hip hop. And when I heard Ain't No Half Stepping, I was like, what in the world?
See, for you to like Earth, Wind and Fire, to like Stevie Wonder, it's interesting you say that. And if you would have said Michael Jackson, you really wouldn't close. But that's Heat Wave. Ain't no half stepping. That's that musical influence in there. You know what I'm saying? It would kind of, get your attention because you're already acclimated with Stevie Wonder's Earth, Wind and Fire. But now here's the 6 degrees of separation because Michael probably wasn't too far. But all of Michael's hits was from the guy from Heat Wave. It's the keyboard player,
Rod Templeton.
Yeah.
6 degrees of separation right there.
But see, that's the roots of hip hop because we weren't musicians then. We took the records, there were the banging records, looped them, rapped over them, which was, from a business point of view, which was excellent to do because if you were starting with original music, that would have put a whole much more burden on hip hop to really break in. Because what we did was we used records that was already accepted, and then we put a subject matter on it that we hope is universal, and then you have nothing but a winning combination. But if it would have been original music, I don't know if we'd be here today, or it might have took a longer process.
It would have took a longer time because because a lot of they were rapping over disco records back then, which were already hits, and people were like, oh yeah, I can just keep dancing to this and not miss a step. For me, going back, I think what Marvin Gaye's What's Going On was another record that went against the grain when he dropped that record too.
Right, that's why Motown didn't want to do that record.
Yeah, so but I wanted to go back to that real quick. But for me, I was sitting here thinking about what was the record. And for me, when it came to hip hop, a lot of my cousins were like 4 or 5 years older than me. So I would listen to a lot of the music they had on cassette at my grandmother's house. LL Cool J's I'm Bad. And the reason why I go back to that one, because I remember sitting on my grandmother's floor in the back room, watching the video, listening to the song, writing the lyrics down. Rewinding, writing the lyrics. Rewind, yes. Rewinding, and that was the one. I remember the video when he was like, yo, we're gonna need backup, we're gonna need backup. That's the one that I remember because it has a memory attached to it. And I remember just sitting at my grandmother's house and just writing those lyrics. I can't even tell you the last time. But
That's
you don't have to.
I have appreciation for an artist when you would sit down. You ain't going to, you don't plan on being a performer.
No,
I'm just writing to be writing it. But when you said Earth, Wind and Fire, that's my group of groups. Right under that, Spike, Family Stone.
My dad had like all vinyls on Earth. I used to go crate digging with him when I was a kid and stuff. Earth, Wind and Fire.
But yeah, I remember my earliest days being introduced to rap, and most people would say the first rap, right? It isn't Rapper's Delight. It really isn't even Fatback Band, King Tim, Super Jock III. It was a guy that did a record about being a truck driver, and it's like the most rated X record in the world. I'm trying to think of his name, and it'll come to me when I stop thinking about it, of course. But just how new it was, and just came in and was so different from what we heard on early radio back in the days. But the record that was the one that really like sold me, as you said, was Grandmaster Flash and the Fierce Five super rapping. That, like, cause Melly Mel, like, people look at Jay-Z today, or what your favorite rap, that was Melly Mel back then. That was the king. And then you had Spoonie G. Spoonie G, Melly Mel, and of course your Kool Moe Dees. But those was your lyricists for that time, you know what I'm saying?
It was an era where the lyricist was glorified and was pushed to the forefront, and it was like, but let's be perfectly honest, man, some of these dudes are whack. Like, I want to even try to get this line. Look, let's be honest, some dudes are just getting in just because they figure they can get some girls. Some dudes are just getting in because they had a rich uncle or something. Like, it really, we need not even lie and act like it's just, an aesthetic. Some of these dudes are not, they don't belong in there. And I think a lot of them see rap as some way to become popular. And
well, let me ask you a question. Let me challenge you with that. Not necessarily saying this is my position, but I hate the term, but for lack of a better term, devil's advocate. Rapping was successful and still is because more people can do that than can sing. Now, I can do that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I can't sing, but I know I can do that. Now, I don't know that they can't do it very well enough. So it's like, if that's the original DNA of rap in the first place. When you look at people that you go, like you just now said, let's just be honest, they can't rap. But why are they so successful? But maybe that's because we're going back full circle to the fact that more people can do the whack rapper than they can do the intellectual rapper.